Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here representing my Chief Executive, the Executive Secretary of Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, Ms. Aisha Rimi. And for want of time, on her behalf, I'm presenting stakeholder synergy for energy for long-term resilience, aligning diverse interests into cohesive strategies for sustainable growth. So I start by stating that it's a wonderful opportunity for me to represent her once again, but unfortunately she has other proud engagement. That was why she could not be able to attend, and she sent her apologies. So the next slide talk about the stakeholder synergies for sustainable investment growth. I start by saying that today's Nigeria's investment landscape, because I'm situating it to the investment promotion and facilitation activities of the Nigerian investment, which can easily be able to even situate into every other organizations. So in today's Nigerian investment landscape, demand collaboration, innovation, inclusive, and engagement and networking. And stakeholders alignment is just not a principle. It's something that needs strategy for resilience and global economic volatility. And as Nigeria is positioning itself for investment-led growth, even corporate organizations to strive, there is need to align policy, capital, and people into longer resilience strategy. So it's not an option to do that. It's just a necessity. So boards must integrate stakeholders' priority early through strategic foresight, session, policy roundtable, and scenario planning, and to anticipate shift rather than react to them. So reactive and reaction to issues is not the best. There is need to always be proactive so as to anticipate whatever might have happened or whatever needed to be done. So there is need to adopt stakeholder-centric governance charter and engage tiers at every levels. When you talk about the government, let me situate it to the government where that is our own environment as a Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission. We are like in the middle of both the private and government, because we deal with the things that has to do with attracting and promoting and sustaining and facilitating investment into the country. And we encourage the private sector as well. And we as well act on behalf of the government to ensure that governance and processes and regulations are not compromised. So we always make sure that we balance our activities when we are dealing with the private sectors with the government officials and vis-a-vis on the other side. So board must anchor values on shared national priorities. That is, creating jobs, sustainability, competitiveness, and community impact. So when I'm talking from this angle, it is from the angle of the government. But again, when you look at the private sector, it's anchored on priorities of even making profit. And even apart from making profit, you have to think of how to sustain the business, how to sustain the objectives and the goals of establishing the organizations. I hear somebody talking about House of Tara the other time. Even the House of Taras and the all manner of organizations that have been striving for years, they are built on not only profit, they are built on sustainability. How to endure and ensure that the organization even outlive the founder or the owner. Talking about internalizing the objectives, the goals into the stakeholders as well as the workers and the workforce. So developing a stakeholder value matrix which is mapping value means across constituency stakeholders, then returning the stakeholders in the private sector means the returns on their investment. Regulators means complying with the regulations. Communities means needs inclusion, because you need to include, there's need for inclusivity when you are dealing with the communities. You need to promote integrated reporting and impact narrative to communicate trade-off transparently. So when you look at NIPC, for instance, like I said, we have a way of collaborating with other relevant agencies that has been impactful. So the one that come to first now is Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission and UNDP. There is something that we are working on now, which is investment opportunity mapping, just for the purpose of mapping opportunities in various sectors of the economy of the country across the state. And we appreciate that UNDP intends to add value to the environment, and NIPC need to add value to the same environment. How do we do this? We are looking at it from the angle of our own focus and objectives. How do we present opportunities to investors in such a way that they will appreciate the quality, the quantity, and the returns on such? We are not just going to be saying there are opportunities in Nigeria. Where, how, what are the qualities, what are the returns, what are the environmental factors, and so many other things. So by conducting this, we are able to come up with some information that we are already hopefully putting up in our website for the information of investors, so as to make informed business decisions, not necessarily coming physically. There's another one that we have with the Japan external trade organizations, where they are collaborating with NIPC to build capacity, to even conduct research on manufacturing and renewable energy, as well as getting relevant information, as well as attracting investors from Japan, among others, with other countries. Then there is collaboration with a state investment promotion agency. NIPC being the foremost investment promotion agency in the country at the federal level, we are collaborating with the state because we know that investment goes to a particular state or FCT in Abuja. So there is need to enhance the subnational investment climate. So as a result of which, we've been working together to build their capacity, to network, to share experiences, and to even, without compromising the priority sectors that the state government or the governors must have in mind, as well as harmonizing with the national development plan of the country and the focus of the government of the day. So these are the examples that I have here. Then this is talking about the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission that was established to encourage, promote, and coordinate investment. We are projected, we enhance the investment climate and the image of the country. We are involved in the investment promotion, that is proactively marketing Nigeria, as well as coordinating the investment promotion activities in the country, as well as providing aftercare support to investors and assisting the investors to navigate the investment processes. Then we advocate, we initiate and support policy measures. We are not policy owners like any like Minister of Agri, Minister of Energy or whatever, and the Minister of Environment. We are just here to support various sector owners to enhance the business environment of the country. And we advise government on policy matters for the purpose of enhancing the investment climate. So these are the thoughts that are put together for us at this level. Thank you for listening.
Can we give him another round of applause, please? Thank you.
Good morning, distinguished directors, colleagues, fellow leaders. It is definitely indeed a privilege and an honor to moderate this very important session on a subject that really lies at the heart of, effective directorship and sustainable leadership. In today's connected world, the role of the director has simply evolved. We are called not just to deliver profits, but to preserve purpose. to balance diverse interests of our employees, our investors, our regulators, and our communities, while ensuring sustainable value creation. So, the modern boardroom is no longer a place for competing voices, but of converging visions, because resilience is built through collaboration and not just isolation. So, this morning, we're going to explore how synergy across stakeholders can strengthen institutions, inspire innovation, and secure long-term profits and growth for our organizations as well as our nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome our distinguished panelists. They are leaders who represent excellence in governance, finance, and social impact. First, I'd like to call on Mr. Urum Kalu, popularly known as Mr. UK, AK, MFR. He's the chairman of Fairchild Group. He's indeed a seasoned boardroom strategist and former group managing director of First Bank Holdings PLC. He's renowned for his expertise in governance, finance, and ethical leadership. Please, let's give him another warm round of applause. Next, I'd like to call on Mrs. Miriam Uwais, MFR. Indeed, she is the founder of Premier Africa Group. She's a respected leader, a policy advisor, and a champion of social inclusion, whose leadership in national social investment programs has transformed the lives of many Nigerians. And as we already have our representative for Ms. Aisha Rimi, the Managing Director and CEO of Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, Mr. Abiola Salami. Abayami Salami, thank you so much for that. Okay, interesting. Indeed, with all of them here, we have a great sector, three-sector degree of minds that will help us show how synergy, sustainability, and stakeholder alignment can really drive long-term success. So I'm going to start with you, Madam Miriam. In your view, what framework or governance structures best support alignment among diverse stakeholder groups?
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here. From experience, it's very important to have like a hybrid model. So you have a coordination, high level, politically backed, coordination council backed by a technical delivery unit or a secretariat. And then of course, some engagement or definite engagement with stakeholder groups, labor, civil society. All of that is important for you to have an inclusive and sustainable strategy for diverse groups. And this is best achieved by engaging first or setting up these councils or these coordination platforms that support. If you have the mechanisms in place, these mechanisms would include, of course, a coordination council, something like the National Council on Privatization, that already has, it brings together so many groups, but led by the vice president, and then it has the BPE, which is the technical coordinating unit, and then of course you have the stakeholder engagement groups, just ensuring that it is led by the stakeholders who have diverse thoughts, and inclusivity is bound to add to the value of shared purpose. You are able to foster collaboration and sustainability by ensuring that you bring in as many views as is possible, so there's a culture of belonging, a culture of ownership, trust and confidence.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Inclusivity and shared value is very important among stakeholders. Mr. UK, Okay, I'm going to come to you now. Diverse stakeholders, they often have conflicting interests, from shareholders seeking profit, okay, to communities that are seeking inclusion. So how do we build trust and shared purpose across such divides?
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, participants and delegates. Let me first of all say that the paper we are listening to by Mr. Salami, well presented, and there are 4 things that resonate. I thought I should start with that. One, you talked about transparency, and then you also talked about collaboration, and then you mentioned impact, and of course reporting. Those are concepts that we would keep hearing as we progress on this journey. But I think to the question raised by moderator, trust is very important, and trust, as we heard yesterday, is the currency, of trade when it comes to relating at the board level. I will also say that trust is not enough. You have to cement it with transparency. That's why I talked about that transparency. And when we also mention trust in the context of the board, what that means is that to the extent that you have diverse interests that are on the board, you need to ask, what are they canvassing? What interests are they pushing or driving at the board level? And so it is important that when we begin to form boards, let us first of all identify the stakeholders that will speak to the various interests. Very important. So diversity is very important, very key. When you have the various voices that represent the constituencies, then it means at the board level, conversations can be a bit more engaging. That's one. 2, it's also important that we understand what we are achieving, what we are trying to achieve. That is the point around the central idea. Alignment with the central idea. What are we solving for? If it is for the growth and advancement of the central idea, then it's easy to build trust. But when we have competing interests, trust becomes more difficult. The 3rd issue is about communication. And you have to go back to the code of the NCCG, okay, 2018, where it was established that constant engagement with the various constituencies can enhance trust. So it's not enough to just come at the AGMs and then show the performance. We're encouraged to hold town hall meetings, to hold sessions with the staff, to feel the pulse of community, and therefore develop an agenda that will address the various concerns of the constituent parts. So that is constant engagement. Now, the other point to make is when you have the dashboard, you have the charter, you have the committees, it is not enough. What do you put in those instruments, in those papers? And here is where the chairman and the secretary have a role to play in constantly ensuring that the items that get surfaced represent the interest of the diverse stakeholders. So a knowledgeable secretary and a very experienced chairman would ensure that the dashboards that are created, the committee reports that are discussed, all of those things will measure those critical issues, ESG. They will measure also things like impact, the workplace. They will measure community needs. And you will now see the trends, the patterns, the insights over time, and see how the business has evolved to address the issues that pertain to those constituent parts. So again, transparency is very important. What I have come to understand is that trust diminishes or decreases when we hide news or facts. It is not the absence of bad news, because it is a normal in businesses. But when you hide them, then you erode trust. And in my experience, I think I'll just share this and I'll close. I recall that in 2016, we had an experience where we needed to report a significant drop in the performance of the group I was running. And we said, look, let's issue a profit warning. It had never been done before. But we felt that in order to build trust into our operations, it was important to come clean with the facts. And that was one singular thing that attracted the confidence of the investing public. So trust, engagement, communication, transparency, surfacing those items in the dashboards, in the committee reports, and monitoring the trends will really build trust.
Thank you so much for that. Trust and transparency, very, very important. And you spoke about communicating and really emphasizing on how communication is very important, not hiding, so that trust is not eroded. Thank you very much for that, sir. On the back of that, of what Mr. UK has said, Mr. Abayomi, thank you very much for that presentation. And you spoke a lot. You spoke a lot about opportunity mapping and for the companies that you're working with for NIPC. I'd like to ask you, now many boards actually struggle with managing expectations, you know, from multiple stakeholders, because you talked about having diverse stakeholders. And they, you know, the expectations, they define value in a different way. So how can directors communicate a cohesive vision that everyone can rally behind?
Thank you for that question. Let me come from the angle of government that I work with. Like I said, we are in the middle of both the public and the private. So let me start by saying one of the things that we need to appreciate that is that the focus and the overall interest of the government is not to make profit, but is about making impact, is about creating, adding value, is about growth and development. It's about public good. So that is the main focus of the government. But when you come to the private sector, it's about making profit, it's about sustainability on both sides, it's about generating income. So we have various stakeholders. For stakeholders, they are focusing on return on their capital, like investors. If you go to the, as many that are investing into various companies that are being quoted in the stock exchange, their own focus is how to make profit. But for regulators, when it comes to the government side, various regulatory agencies will be focusing on compliance. And when you come to community where a particular, even government establishment is, let's start with the local government, up to the federal level, or even a corporate body, they'll be looking at what is their own benefit. What has this company or this government or this at the 3 tiers level from the local government has added into their own? That is in terms of jobs, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of corporate social responsibility. Then when we talk about the government, like I said earlier, it's about sustainable economic impact. So you need to think of how to marry this interest. And that is why from time to time, responsible government, and from the angle of the even Nigerian government, always make sure that they involve the private sector or the affected set of people when it comes to policy making, when it comes to coming up with an act. For instance, when you look at the recent harmonization of the Nigerian tax that has become the Nigerian Tax Act now, a lot of engagement was involved at various stages to ensure that the private sector particularly that are going to be paying this tax were actually consulted. Even the local government, even the state governors or state government at the level of the Nigerian Governors Forum were involved to ensure that their buy-in was taken into cognizance before it was passed and even signed into law by the Nigerian president. So what I'm saying is that even when you look at NIPC, for instance, like I said, we get ourselves involved in engaging the private sectors from time to time. Recently, one of the way we do that is involving ourselves in interministerial meeting. Like I said, from time to time, anything that has to do with policies or decisions at the level of the government, like Miriam Way said, there is need to synergize and to take a position from the angle of the government. So we are involved in the interministerial meeting at various levels. But when you come to the level of the private sector, we engage even the private sector in stakeholders engagement. Recently, last week, Monday, we engaged the German and European Union investors in stakeholders engagement to get feedback from them, to know what are their challenges, areas that government are doing things, and what that are needed to do. We even make sure that there are a lot of relevant agencies like customs was there and so many others to be able to answer questions. These are the ways I think this should be done. And at the level of corporate organizations, you have your customers, you have your stakeholders, that is the investors that are investing in it, you have the board. There is need to engage and involve everyone so that there will be an inclusive decision making and even feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What I gathered from that is that it's very important to be engaged and to get feedback. Ask them questions. What are the challenges, so that you can imbibe that in meeting stakeholder expectations. Thank you so much for that. All right, we mentioned earlier that boards are evolving. So, Madam Miriam, coming back to you now. I want you to just, for a moment, tell us, looking ahead, what kind of mindset shift, must boards, directors, leaders adopt to ensure that stakeholder engagement becomes not just a compliance exercise, but indeed a true driver of long-term growth and corporate legacy?
I think it's really important for there to be a mind shift because, as you said, things are evolving, and for sustainability and for building resilience, it's important to ensure that there's transparency, so consistent dialogue, not just one-on-one, just one-off conversations. It's also important to ensure that focus on the traditional, maybe avoiding risks and all of that, needs to extend to purpose alignment, trying to align yourself with the purpose rather than focusing on what not to do. Focusing on what to do is very important. And for that, you need to articulate your goals, what your purpose is. You need to look around and see, what impact can be made by your company. Because if you really want to survive, I think it's important for you to have the ESG reporting. The indicators are already there with the IFC, and I think a lot of companies would do well to be able to move from compliance to also commitment to ensure that they're able to move. And of course, that is what is critical, is getting the feedback, as was mentioned, engaging constantly, getting the evidence that you need to ensure that you're on top of your game, and ensuring also that there's this dialogue that continues over time, so that you breed the trust. Silence breeds speculation, and we need to get rid of the fears and instead focus on what would foster confidence, because that is so critical to be able to move into the future. you need to also share even the uncertain, the negative things, so that the stakeholders continue to have implicit trust in the actions or decisions that are taken by the board and the management. So I would say we need to move with the times, and we need to open our minds to what is happening around us and not just focus on transactions and profit, but also on the impact that the company can make so that the community itself supports the existence of the company. And you continue to grow because the stakeholders, including, of course, those that would influence or that you influence the reputation, and the reputation of the company also increases or grows in the public, and so the market itself would grow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Like you rightly said, purpose. As an organization, what is your purpose? It's not just about performance. So purpose is very key. And like you rightly said, it's like tapping into what's going on today. And I like how, as you mentioned, ESG, being a new terminology, lots of boards are still yet to tap into that area. But you need to emphasize how your impact as an organization, can really show can bring about growth and sustainable growth at that. So thank you so much for that. Very important aspect of what are you a board for, what are you as an organization. Sustainable growth is about looking into the future and tapping into what is new today. Mr. UK, we talk about resilience, and we've been speaking about resilience all day yesterday as well, and today as well. But innovation is key. How can stakeholder synergy accelerate innovation rather than slow it down?
Thank you. I want to make a statement that I hope will be agreeable by all of us. Resilience is not just about survival. Resilience, for me, should be about reinvention. It should be about sustainability and being future-proof. So it's not about today. It's about securing your future and ensuring that you understand that unless we do things differently and build the right muscles, then we may atrophy, we may have a company that's no longer in existence or institution that will collapse. And that's also important because every day you see new entrants. So the guys you thought are your competitors today may not be the competitors tomorrow. Take the banks, for instance. Time was when we were competing with just banks. But it turns out the fintechs have taken over a significant part of what banks were doing. Okay, and if you look at it also, even the telcos have also encroached into the domain of banks. So who are the competitors of banks, really and truly? So resilience, makes you look beyond today, and you create structures and create institutions and build the right, frameworks that will enable you compete even into the future. That's one. Second point I want to make is that the diverse interest groups or interests we see on the boards and the other stakeholders in the ecosystem should not be seen by boards as adversaries or pressure groups. They should be seen as co-creators. And I'm going to cite an instance. If you look at the big fintechs, why have they become so successful? They've adopted co-creation. And so when you see hackathons, when you see banks that create the environment for people to compete, even employees being asked to, get onto challenges to reform or to build products, the outcomes will always be very, 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 successful. And that's the point about getting every stakeholder involved. So if you think about it, the 3 unicorns Nigeria has produced, largely from the fintech space, is not a surprise. And so that is the product of collaboration, of building resilience and building structures. So again, let me emphasize the need for co-creation. And even yesterday, I think it was the Minister of Education that said he was looking forward to receiving reports, and the CIoD, coming up with structures, suggestions that can help them in reforming the school system. That is co-creation. That is building resilience. That's building future ready. Okay, so the third point I want to make is continuous feedback. That's also something that we need to emphasize. How much budget? And it was mentioned yesterday. We need to keep refining. We need to keep challenging. We need to keep probing. And so having a strong budget, whether you call it R&D or you call it future innovation, whatever it is, we need to create a loop and sustain funding of that loop so that we, from time to time, say, yes, we have done well, we haven't done well. Where we have done well, we put more money because that becomes the low-hanging fruit that can be monetized immediately. The other ones, you can continue to incubate. That's resilience. The third thing I want to say, or fourth, is the reward system has to change a bit. And this is advice to all that are gathered here. We need to incentivize our reward failure. It's almost like an oxymoron. Why would I reward failure? But it is the attempt at discovering the uncharted paths where you say, we will not sanction you for failing, but we now know that this is not the right way to do it. Constantly recalibrating the key performance indicators, performance metrics, so that those that are focusing on innovation, research, probing into the future, and building resilience are rewarded, not punished. Finally, I think it's also important to make this point that the board itself has to be thoroughly equipped. The exposure is very important. Attending conferences, attending seminars, and basically refining our understanding, learning, unlearning, and relearning. All of those things will go into building resilience so that when management brings a report, a presentation, or a proposal, the board is not at sea. I have seen where boards do not understand proposals and they get defeated at the boards, no funding, and the next year another company takes up that same path, is approved, and it becomes a game changer. So boards must also be prepared to support management, and that's being resilient in all that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Honestly, resilience is built on collaboration, not isolation. And it's important for us to, co-create and collaborate. Very interesting perspective on rewarding failure. That's interesting because, again, it's all about collaboration and everybody thinking out of the box, like you said, learning, relearning, and unlearning if you have to. Thank you so much for that, Mr. UK. Mr. Abayomi, I'd like to ask you, just on the back of, talking about fintech and their success to date. Technology and data, right, they now provide unprecedented visibility into stakeholder sentiment and impact. So I'd like to ask, how can boards themselves use these tools responsibly to inform strategic resilience?
Thank you for the question. So I will continue from where Mr. Eke stopped by saying we are living in a data-defined age where technology can either be a bridge, a barrier, depending on how it is used. I'm a Yoruba man. With all due regards to the elders here, that's the way Yoruba will say. What face another person is what backs another person. That's the interpretation. So what I'm trying to say is that when you have data, when you are, and each organization needs to be data-oriented and gather the information. And for researchers and for corporate governance, even for government, it depends on what you intend to use the tool that is available to you at a particular time. That's why I said what face another one is what back another one. So to use this data and technology responsibly, it is very important for an organization to look at how they can manipulate or utilize the available information to achieve their overall goal and be resilient. Let me be practical by stating this. I think some years back, the Cadbury and the producer of manufacturer of Milo, and the picnic realized that having a picnic in a can, in that soft whatever liquid form, not every Nigerians have the kind of money to buy and to preserve such. They came up with sachet. And coming up with sachet, they were able to penetrate so many classes, even from the top to the bottom. With all due regard, even MDs use sachet now because it's easily, you just use and dispose it, and it preservable. What am I trying to say? It is as a result of the data and the information that has been gathered that make them to be able to be strategic about how to even penetrate the market. That's a point. Another thing is that when an organization is highly proactive and trying to even satisfy the customer, particularly when you look at your host community. Let me say, for instance, the oil producing companies in the Niger Delta region. It is very important for them to be mindful of the environment where they are operating, so as to do what? So as to build capacity, add value, make an impact in such. Even in every dimensions, even in any areas. I have a privilege to say that with the administration or implementation of what is called Pioneer Status Incentive, corporate social responsibility happens to be one of the important parameters that we check before a company that is even qualified with the product that they are making can be able to be given be approved to have the incentives of the 3 years, initial incentives with another additional 2 years. So what we have noticed is that because of the fact that we have continued to engage, encourage the organizations, the private sectors, we find a situation whereby so many of them even grant scholarship, add value to the environment, build school, so many things, even add value to the society, their communities. So these are the things that can be gotten from technology and the data and the research. Before you know, what used to be, I can't remember now, what used to be a petrochemical industry before, I can't remember the name, that is now, it used to be LMA, petrochemical. Now it's Indorama. Indorama make sure that they use this technology and the research to even make sure that they even seeded certain percentage of their equity for the community. So as they are making money, the community too, they are getting the dividends. And you can, it's like now, LMA is so doing, Indorama is doing so well, even exporting so many of their products, adding value to the Nigerian forex, and at the end of the day, the community are not looking at the company as their that company. They are looking at this as our company. Thank you for watching.
A very good example of stakeholder synergy. Thank you so much for that. All right, Madam Miriam, Mr. UK has mentioned about communication, but I would just want to ask you again, trust is fragile, yet it's very foundational. So what role does consistent communication and transparency play in sustaining stakeholder confidence, especially during times of uncertainty?
Yeah, so I think it's important to be predictable, because predictability gives assurance that, about projections, knowing how you will go, not disruptive, nothing that will really, take you by surprise. It's also important to set up mechanisms for consistent, as I said earlier, consistent dialogue. So you're able to get the feedback that you need to foster the kind of confidence that you need. You need to share information, and you need to identify the groups, the various stakeholders that will actually benefit and you will benefit from. And when you share this information, you ensure you keep transparency and ethics as primary objectives, so you keep communicating very honestly, even where things are uncertain. In fact, the more open you are about uncertainty, the more you're likely to breed the kind of trust that you need from the stakeholders, because they are assured that you're not hiding anything. And as I said earlier, silence actually breeds speculation, and of course speculation goes into all kinds of dark corners that you really don't need. It also fosters accountability, because once the community or the stakeholders realize that you're open about all the scenarios or the information that they need to know, they realize that they can hold you accountable for all the various issues that may arise. So information sharing, trying to breed understanding, to reduce fear in the minds of those who feel they're investing and might run into trouble, and also breeding the kind of confidence. And for leaders, especially in the companies, you need to communicate early, you need to communicate frequently, and you need to communicate honestly. It's important also to centralize the coordination of messaging, so not different people from the organization speaking up, because they're bound to, contradict or conflict one another. It's important to have one central messaging point for the public and for even internally in the company. It's important to use data and evidence, because that also gives the assurance that you know what you're doing. Everything you're doing is evidence-based. It's important to also listen very actively to not only what is happening within the company, but what is happening outside, to market trends, to what the stakeholders expect from you. So setting up these coordination mechanisms is very, very important, and platforms can be created that ensure that all of this happens, and the board is able to take strategic decisions, because they're able to inform their decisions with what the expectations are. And as Mr. UK said, it's about stakeholder-led decision making. So you're able to project and not just react all the time. You're able to ensure that you're ahead and you keep moving in the direction that will ensure that you're sustainable, your business is sustainable, and you're resilient.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, please let's give her a round of applause. So some excellent insights there. I'm hearing common themes like trust, transparency, collaboration, long-term thinking, innovation, very important. I'd like to use this opportunity now to open up the floor for questions and answers, going by the time. So maybe we'll have about 2 or 3 questions if we can squeeze that into the time. Yes, I do see, I think I saw your hand first, yes.
I think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I think this has been a really powerful and insightful session, very, very thought-provoking. And what you have done is you have explored the topic from the perspective of opportunities for collaboration and adopting that multi-stakeholder approach. And that's great, but I also think it would be worthwhile to explore it from the perspective of what are the risks to businesses of not adopting that approach, because I think that would be a useful part of the conversation. So could you shed some light on that, please? Thank you.
Very interesting question, because it really speaks to if there's any one thing that boards actually must stop doing, to build that stronger stakeholder synergy. Yes, what would they need to stop? Because what's the risk? Mr. UK, thank you.
Okay, a very, very good point, the consequence. And of course, we looked at the various stakeholders. One of the stakeholders we identified is the regulator, clearly. Of course, you have the consumers, you have the suppliers, you have the stakeholders. So at the very top of it is the regulation. And if you're not compliant, obviously you can lose your license, and that's the end of the business. Which means that if you have charters, if you have dashboards, which help you monitor the metrics and performance, the reporting, which was highlighted by the lead speaker, Mr. Salami, creates an opportunity for intervention. And we have seen where licenses are lost, the consequence of not complying. So it's not enough to just document it and say, oh, I have a dashboard, I have a committee, I have these reports. But how transparently are we reporting it? So that's what I call the genuine transparency, beyond just filling the numbers. Now, you also have seen where valuation of businesses get eroded. It is not happenstance. When you are not delivering the numbers, you are not taking care of the other constituent parts. If the expectation is dividend and you're not providing dividend, if it is that your products are creating crisis in the community, of course, the regulators come in. So you now see that investors can vote with their feet. They live. It's no longer about return on capital, it's return of capital. Return my money, I want to go. All right, so the consequence is failure. Businesses are living beings, let's understand it. The same way, individuals, are born, are created, they mature, they die. Companies can also rise and fall. What is important is for boards to create institutions, lasting institutions that will endure and outlive them. And so there's a need, I can't overlevel that point, for board members to understand the purpose and that you have that duty of care to the shareholders. And collectively with the management is a shared responsibility, okay? And you'll be willing to adopt, ready to adopt, because there are dynamics that will keep changing and you must be able to react. That is also where you need to go beyond the confines of the boardroom or management and bring industry experts, subject matter experts, so they will tell you where the market is moving to. It's an investment that is worth it. If you rely on domain expertise, you lose the train. Okay, so you need to constantly engage and look beyond the box to tap into what is happening in the marketplace.
Thank you very much. I see a gentleman's hand behind. Yes.
My name is Victor Ramosele, ME Consulting. First, congratulations, panel. I think the subject matter was well explored. UKK, you, my good friend, you raised a few provocative statements there. Let me quote you: learn from failure rather than attract sanction. My side comment before I say the main comment is that in Nigeria, there's a cultural impediment there, because you actually find that in our culture, we do more sanctioning. Just look at how families are operated, or how most of us were brought up when we were young. So that's actually a barrier. We're trying to sanction rather than learn from it. So that's the cultural barrier. So even when you're in management, you find that you tend to want to sanction rather than learn. But I think and there's a new development, and I think Mr. Salami, you mentioned that when you were talking about LMA. I worked for donkey years in the oil and gas industry, so I can tell you a little bit about that. One good thing, and I think everybody should try to take the PIA, there's something very good about it. HCDTF, which is Host Community Development Trust Fund. Every company in its area will have to put aside 3%. Then when you put aside 3%, then out of that 3%, there's a structured way where the community actually engages actively and manages it. If that is done by all companies, not just oil and gas companies, I think there will be quite some progress. And that's one way where you can actually quell or douse the tension we have in the oil and gas industry, because you have the communities who are struggling, and then you have management wanting to do their business. How do you reconcile this conflict? I think that's my contribution to the discussion.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello? Excuse me. I was standing.
Oh, sorry, sir. Okay. Maybe after him, we can ask the question. He said. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Kennedy Waifikunwaboy. I want to thank the panelists for your well thought out delivery of the topic under focus. My question is to Mr. Carlo MFRO. You did, when we were talking about stakeholders, you mentioned the issue of trust, and that was quite my takeaway. If there's a trust between the stakeholders and the people who are doing businesses, then you can actually actualize the set goal thought out by the board. But my question is, especially when you talk about the extraction sector of our economy, talking about the mining and the oil and gas, if there's this trust which we want to encourage between these stakeholders, especially the community where these resources are being sourced, how come that this community are still very poor? And what the businesses, the companies that are doing business in this community, they are very rich. That's one. I also know that in international reporting, when you're talking about sustainability reporting, we take it for granted, especially for those in the extraction industry, specifically in the mining sector and the oil and gas. Our environment is endangered. I know that there are policies and there are laws in place to protect the environment. Is there any way we can hold the companies who are doing businesses in this community accountable for what they are doing to our environment? And on a lighter note, how come that you are doing businesses in these environments and these communities are still very poor, and yet you have your corporate offices in the cities? So if you are talking about trust, Mr. Carlo, why can't you stay in this community and have your corporate offices in the community and live with them to make money? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap all of that in one.
Thank you. I'm going to take the points raised by my friend Victor Remosele, and then I'll come back to the excellent point made by Kennedy. Let's think about it in a way, Victor. You know, the same way the IFRS standards requires you to make provisions for credit losses, so expected credit loss. It hasn't crystallized, but you make provision for it. We can also begin to think, how can we create a buffer such that the P&L of current year or current quarter is not impacted by that write-down of the cost of failure? So, to the extent that you are looking at quarterly performance, you will continue to sanction those failures instead of saying, okay, let's keep going because the end is looking okay. So I'm suggesting that we create a reserve. Over time, build it up so that the impact does not hit current year P&L. You can take it off the buffer or the reserve that has been created. It can be done. All right. Second way to do it is to attract grants where you can actually work with, collaborators in the ecosystem and actually provide the grant in aid, which you use to do your research and to do the write-offs. If they fail, they fail. Okay. So it doesn't impact P&L. That's the point. Now I'll go to the question raised by Kennedy. Let me repeat what I said in a different way. The currency of trust is transparency. The currency of trust is transparency. So when you hear that we voted $1 billion to clean up environments and it's not visible, you can't see it, then it is no longer a genuine transparency which I talked about. It has to be self-evident that we have done this. Because you see, it's like having a budget, and then you say it was executed, and then you can't see the evidence of that execution. Trust is eroded, so genuine transparency is key. So one of the ways, and I'm sure that you had some of the regulators, or you hear rather, not heard, when they say they will sanction, they will delist, they will withhold license, they will not approve, is to the extent that they want full compliance to those requirements. I know, for instance, that Shell had tried to re-engage on the Ogoni land matter, but there has to be restitution. And oftentimes we say they should relocate at those places. That's also what we should begin to do. Compel them to live with the communities, the host community, so they can feel the pain, all right? And so if you have a strong regulation, if you have a strong government, if you have institutional checks and balances, those things can be done. It is the absence of the will to execute and to compel compliance that breeds all of what you have said. I guess the point here is that all our regulators, government entities that should enforce should really step up. In the banking industry, you know the consequence of not complying. You know it. SEC will sanction you, huge amounts of money. And so there's some transparency and discipline in those sectors. But I guess there's a whole lot of work we need to do in some of those extractive industries where our regulation needs to, brace up and be able to do exactly what is done in the countries of those companies that come, the IOCs, for instance. There are things that can't be tolerated out of Nigeria, but they get away with it. So compliance and enforcement are the critical pillars for ensuring what you have done, what you have said is done.
Thank you so much, Mr. UK. Now, we really are out of time, but I'd like to honor the chair of the programs committee, Otumba Bimbo Ashiru, to ask his question.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I actually want to commend Mr. Salami, representing the DG Nigerian NIPC. So what I'm trying to say is that we're talking about succession. He's a civil servant, and he was able to do a good presentation on behalf of his boss. But I have a question for him, because we call them, so for those of us that have worked with government, civil servants, we call them landlords and landladies. They are the ones that can sort out this issue. Nigerian NIPC, you are the gateway to this nation. When the president is traveling, he takes your head, whoever your head is. Are you guys promised that each state, you are going to have offices there? Because the importers, the investors that are coming to this country, they are not going, I'm sure you know what I'm trying to say, they are not going to invest in Abuja. They invest in the states. And you promised opening some offices. I remember some years when I was in government, you opened in Ogun State. So have you people sustaining those offices? Because all the problems we are talking about, employment, all those things, and you civil servants are the one that we recommend to the incoming head of the place. Aisha will leave, you are going to be there. I pray that maybe they will make you the DG, but whatever it is, let us find out how you people have been able to sustain those things as civil servants. Because I know that when we are talking about succession and we're talking about problems, these are the problems. They don't, when they wait on the directors or ministers to go, then they will keep the file somewhere. They won't put it out. So I hope you are not doing that in your own ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, do you want to respond? Okay. You don't have to. Okay. All right. I want us to thank our distinguished panelists for their rich perspectives, and of course to our audience for your attention. Do they want you to respond? Okay, please do. Yes, the promise. You need to keep the promise.
Thank you, sirs and ma'ams. And it is a privilege to be here. I was actually in the room when they were talking about succession plan, and I didn't know that I would be asked. And anyway, I want to say my executive secretary, though she's not here, she like to mentor the fresh graduate a lot. She called them the, I think, what do they call them now? I can't remember now. The Gen Z. That engage them. What will take you 10 minutes, will take them less than 1 minute. So, and I want to say that NIPC as an organization, we have tried we have 6 offices in the 6 geopolitical zone. We have in Enugu, we have in Plateau, we have in Ibadan, we have in Kano, we have in Maiduguri. We even have a South-South office. So we are respecting that decision that was made long time ago when you are in government, sir. So that number one. Then Nigeria being a federating state, each state has its own state investment promotion agency, because to some level, state government are autonomous in terms of what they want to attract into their state. And as a result of which, NIPC we have been involved even in mentoring, supporting, and building the capacity of the state investment promotion agency. So to a greater extent, we have them all over the state now, and we even have a forum where we talk together to even enhance the investment climate at the subnational level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's dialogue, it reminds us that resilience is built on relationships. When boards listen with intent, they lead with integrity, and they link purpose to performance. They create synergy that sustains value across all generations. So just a reminder, stakeholder synergy, it involves alignment, collaboration, transparency, inclusion, and shared value. Why? Why is this important for us as directors? So that we can strengthen our governance and reputation, so that we can build long-term resilience, and that we can encourage ethical and transparent leadership. And of course, position our organizations for sustainable success beyond short-term profit. Once again, I'd like to thank all our distinguished panelists for their great insights. Let us continue to build organizations that are not only profitable, but purposeful, not only successful, but sustainable. Thank you all once again.